here to this breaking story, Elon Musk to buy MSNBC. So this all kind of came about on X, formerly known as Twitter, because today somebody tweeted out about how, MSNBC is just hemorrhaging viewers and viewership is so down. And it's kind of a miserable place right about now because, their gal did not win the election. And apparently the viewers just left as soon as that transpired. And you now have NBC or Comcast putting the cable assets of this company up for sale. They had talked about it for a while. We've talked about it for a while, you and I, but on October 31st, the company came forward with the earnings report saying, you know what, we are looking at this. And then 2 weeks, literally like 2 weeks to the day after the election, that afternoon, they announced that they would be spinning off the cable assets. Not all of them. They're keeping Bravo, actually, but they're taking the networks MSNBC, CNBC, Oxygen, owned by Oprah, as well as Sci-Fi, and Golf Channel, all which are said to have about $7 billion in revenue a year. And they're spinning those off in part because, Comcast as a company will do better as a valuation. You're trying to return shareholder value to shareholders. It will do better if it doesn't have this baggage, which is seen kind of as, an older industry at this point. This is not a growing business, not necessarily that Comcast is, but it's so different from what they do. Plus there's the political stink and all that. So just to back up, they're selling. They've got SpinCo out there. And Don Jr. today tweeted or retweeted this out, sort of saying, hey, I have an interesting idea, Elon Musk. And Elon wrote back saying, how much does it cost? Which is exactly what he said back in the day when he was looking at Twitter. And he spent some $42 billion. Okay, so let's unpack it. What do you think? I mean, it would be kind of cool.
Yeah, in terms of, if Elon, never underestimate Elon Musk, right? In terms of the way he can transform things. And, I don't know if he's not necessarily making tons of money on X yet because of the tension with the advertisers, but he's transformed that platform and it's become such an amazing, the whole world is on it, and that's how people get their news, and that's how we get our perspectives. It's really, and it was possibly played a very instrumental role in Trump getting elected. So, in terms of what Elon could potentially do, thinking outside the box, getting control of some of these channels and introducing some new differentiated content that, maybe aligns more with either his politics or just his interests, his way of thinking. We'll see what he's, if he can parallel park a rocket, right? I mean, he could probably generate some cable TV content for us. Yeah.
That's a good line. I need to write that one down and remember it. I think you could generate some cable TV content. I think you could actually have a lot of fun with this. The question I have is the model broken? I mean, here we are streaming live. Thank you for everybody tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. 76 Research is our channel on YouTube, and it's very, very small. We just started it pretty recently, and we're here as much as we can be. The bulk of our work, of course, is coming through the writing and the research and the stock picks that we have that Rob and I, have put together these three different model portfolios for you at 76 Research. But this channel is growing, and I'm excited by it. And obviously the Trish Regan show, super exciting for me. And we've seen phenomenal growth, which has made me just say, well, gee, why didn't I come over here sooner? Why did I have all those years in cable? It reminds me, Rob, of back in my network days, like I was in network TV. And, growing up, that was a big deal because we'd sit down as a family and we'd watch the, ABC World News Tonight, because we were in New Hampshire and there was only one affiliate, which was ABC. So we watched our local news on ABC. We watched World News Tonight. And then, I'd occasionally catch CBS. I'd occasionally catch NBC. And so when I thought, okay, I'm going to go be a reporter, where did I want to go and report? At the networks, which is exactly what I did, actually, for all of those. In official capacity, more as a commentator at ABC, but for CBS Evening News and for NBC Nightly News. And that seemed like it, right? And then I was like, this cable thing, what is this cable thing? Eventually I went to cable and I was like, wow, okay, that's where it's at. Like, forget this network stuff where I get 90 seconds, if I'm lucky, to do a taped piece and trying to explain, I don't know, like the GDP report or interest rates or whatever it would be in such a short amount of time was really annoying and exhausting and contrived. And then I got over to cable and I was like, wow, the freedom. And yet not entirely, right? Because you still have the hard commercial breaks and you have only so much time and you have a lot of management structure, like multi layers of management structure. So coming over to this side of things and streaming, whole new ballgame. This is to me just like mind blowing. And I think that this is the future. So when I look at the potential for Elon Musk, like going in and buying these old networks, why do it if you could just create all that stuff maybe on your own and not have the baggage of these legacy contracts? In many cases, right? They're getting paid by the cable companies, which means they can't stream, they can't do the podcast, they can't do all the fun stuff that we're doing right now. I guess he would just go in and break all that up.
Yeah, in terms of what he could do to really kind of grow that business, that's hard to see. Or maybe he figures out some strategy to kind of integrate it with the with the streaming business. So in terms of it being like a real financially motivated move on his part, maybe that's not what it is. But Trish, it's important to remember, like from Comcast perspective, as we're talking about the changes in the industry, Comcast fundamentally is actually just a broadband company, right? It's not really a cable company in the way we traditionally thought of it. It's a company that brings broadband access to people's homes and to businesses, and that's how they really make all their money. And they have content, but it's not growing, and it's becoming it's a small piece. So you talk about $7 billion of revenues, for these channels. It's just a small percentage. So they're gonna spin it off. They're really just gonna kind of focus on their core business, which is delivering broadband, delivering internet access to people in order to give them what they actually want, which is just internet access, which is to see the streaming content, to watch your show, to watch Netflix, and they'll kind of rid themselves of the headache of Joy Reid and Morning Joe and the rest of it, which is probably causing some friction or in various ways in terms of since it's not really a profit driver for them, why do they need to have all that baggage with the customer base and potentially political heat? So it makes sense that they're spinning it off. It doesn't do anything for them.
Do you think that the election was dependent on it? When I think back about the hysteria on MSNBC, I mean, it was absolute hysteria in the mainstream media in general. They did not want Donald Trump to win. And I'm like, guys, as we'd hear about him being the next Hitler, I'm like, wow. I mean, that's like a serious attack. Like, how do you come back from being, except for the fact that he was president for 4 years and, we're still standing. And I think people look back fondly on how prices were so much lower. And there seemed to be, despite the chaos on, say, Twitter, I used to joke that he single-handedly was keeping that company alive until Elon came around. But aside from that, everything was kind of functioning smoothly as it should. 2020 got in the way with COVID. But other than that, I mean, it was a pretty good experience, I think, for most people, economically speaking. And so there's this desire to go back to it. But the mainstream was so worked up, Rob. I mean, it was sort of over the top. And as I look at it in retrospect, I'm like, oh, was this why? Because they knew that their livelihoods would be damaged, potentially severely damaged, because, there would be these changes coming, including to their industry.
Yeah, it's an interesting point where they just doing everything they possibly could to create hysteria to prevent Trump from winning and prevent this sort of inevitable, their irrelevance, right? But I mean, it was just a horrible, those analogies. I mean, I get what's the saying, whoever, in middle school, whoever accuses the other person of being Hitler first loses the debate. I mean, it was just such a ridiculous charge, and it wasn't once or twice; it was all day long. And I think everyone now looking at it saying, okay, is this quality content? Is this what people are really going to sit down and want to watch day in, day out, this hysterical ranting and raving? So they kind of broke themselves. They kind of, rendered themselves irrelevant, through this kind of shock value.
They totally did. They totally did. But I even wonder, like from the FCC perspective, you now have, for example, Brandon Carr coming in, and he's exposing already what the second most important thing at the FCC in terms of their mandate was DEI, which is why when you turn on commercials and you turn on the television, like, you get somebody with purple hair and somebody with yellow hair and somebody with green hair, basically. I'm making this up, but the point being that we have to always reflect the diversity, and it feels very contrived and very forced. And that was because the FCC was demanding it. So I just look at it and say, okay, so now there's a new sheriff in town. This new sheriff is going to have higher expectations in terms of the quality of the broadcasting when you're getting, say, an FCC. If you're getting a license from the federal government, can you really spout like total nonsense that is 100% negative on one party and 100% positive on the other? I mean, so much for fair and balance. They're not giving us that.
Yeah, it's not as if Trump wants to, control what the media says, right, and sort of restrict their ability.
No, he definitely doesn't. In fact, when I look back on those days when he was in office, I used to make this point to people, like, listen, like the fact that you have this much discord from the media, that wouldn't exist if we were in a fascist society. Like the fact that there is this much, anger, and it's expressed on television nonstop, that actually should show you he's not clamping down on that. And I don't mean this to be misinterpreted. And I think you're helping to clarify it. I'm not saying for one second that somebody shouldn't be able to spout their opinion, but it's a little tiring when I pick up the New York Times and they're trying to tell me that there's no inflation and that wages are growing. And I'm like, no, guys, inflation is cumulative. So even if it came down 0.1% last month, which it actually didn't last month, but let's pretend it did. The point is it's still on the heels of everything that's been going on. And then when you're telling me that wages are growing, when I'm looking at real wages adjusted for inflation, I know they're not growing. It's a little exhausting, right? The narrative is not fair. It is one-sided. And so you just kind of, I guess, if you're the evening news, want to do a better job, at least pretend to do a better job at offering all perspectives.
Yeah. And look, this Spinco thing was announced this week, right? So just immediately after the election. So they obviously waited to see what happened. And, on the one hand, you can see, okay, like the anchors themselves might have an agenda, but the company is looking at, okay, we have this group of people, they're ranting and raving about the guy who's now going to be president as being, a fascist dictator. And is that really like a plausible business model, to have all of these network, personalities just kind of attacking
bashing
the president
him all the time.
States
well, it's not a plausible.
Way.
It's like it's not even working for ratings. That's what's amazing to me. Like it's not like anybody's watching them, so it's like lose right across the board.
Yeah. So,
can you imagine what would happen though if like Elon gets to first base on this thing? I mean, can you imagine Joy Reid? Joe and Mika. It's fun to think about.
I'm not sure they'll have their seats for too long. But maybe he would give it to them, right? Like maybe just for our continued amusement, maybe they would like continue to have like a 30 minutes or something on.
Yeah. And by the way, I again want to stress that there should be room for all opinions. It's like when Tucker went over to interview Putin and everybody flipped out. Oh my gosh, we should not. And I'm like, wait a second, like, come on. Like he actually runs a country. Why wouldn't you want to hear from him? Even if it's all noise, even if it's all propaganda, let me as a viewer make that decision about whether I'm going to listen or whether I'm going to tune it out. But let me have the opportunity to hear it. Don't shut it down before it gets to me. And that's what was troubling. And I guess what's fair, and I think that Elon would make a point to do this. Look, I mean, he's tried to recruit liberals to have more of a presence on Twitter. And I think that will grow in time. But you do want all sides represented. And that's really critical in our sort of exchange of ideas and speech. We need to make sure that we challenge ourselves. Otherwise, you can get stagnant really, really fast.
Well, and look, on Twitter, on X, I mean, liberals really do have a voice. I mean, RFK Jr. is not a traditional conservative, right? He is a traditional liberal. He has some he has some ideas that are not consistent with previous, Republican platforms. And I think there's a lot of, gravitation to some of the better ideas, right? And the focus on issues that have evaded, focus for, within conservative circles for years and decades. So there is this kind of like growth, and like as like the political realignment happens and like kind of these different kind of divergent perspectives get integrated, and actually many of them get traction because they are good ideas. I think RFK Jr. Has some really compelling ideas when it comes to improving the overall health of the American population.
You're saying something that's really interesting, though, these divergent ideas and the importance of having your ideas challenged, because you can make them better and better and better. And what's been amazing about what's happened at this moment in time is that you have a Tulsi Gabbard and an RFK Jr. coming together with Donald Trump. And look, I mean, a lot of conservative economic thinkers, free market capitalists that are big believers in meritocracy. And, so all of these minds sort of coming together and taking the best of what we can all offer and forming something entirely new, because it's not the traditional conservative party. And, you look over at Kamala, she's certainly not the traditional Democrat party at all. So I think there has been this massive realignment. And I got to tell you, like, I'm sorry, but conservatives are just hands down winning the day. And they're winning the day on all of these policy issues that I think are so critical right now.